Welcome, everyone, to today's Acronis webinar, Achieving Regulatory Compliance in the Face of AI-Enhanced Cybercrime. I'm your host, James Slaby. I'm the Director of Cyber Protection at Acronis. I've spent about half my career as an industry analyst covering cybersecurity and networking technology, and the other half working for vendors of cybersecurity like Acronis. Check my LinkedIn profile if you want to know more about my long background in the business. Just a few housekeeping notes. We are recording today's session, and we'll send you a link via email to the recording later so you can share it with colleagues who couldn't make it today. We're very interested in your questions. We have a good chunk of today's agenda dedicated to answering your questions live. So submit those via the Q&A interface. I've got a colleague who will be answering some of those questions via Zoom and saving a few for me to present to our panel later on. So I'm going to start today with a quick look at the overall cyber threat environment, particularly how AI has kind of made things worse for those of us who are in the profession of defending our businesses against cyber criminal threats. And of course, this is what has driven the regulatory environment, government and industry kind of pushing businesses to protect sensitive data from cyber incursions. I'm then going to invite an esteemed guest. We have an extraordinarily experienced, accomplished, and acclaimed legal professional in compliance and privacy for our discussion today. I'm then going to turn the podium over to my colleague, solutions engineer at Acronis, who will give us a very brief tour of our solution that helps our customers protect their sensitive data against cyber threats. Then we're going to go to your questions, and I'll wrap up very briefly with some additional resources for you to take a look at. So let me start by giving you a quick overview of what's going on in the cyber threat environment. You're probably familiar with many of the attack vectors that I'm going to kind of look at here, how criminals are getting in these days. There we go. I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my remote here. Acronis has a network of data centers around the world, and our cyber threat research team has sensors all across the globe collecting information on cyber threats. And their recent conclusions in the report that we issue every few months is that there are over 250,000 new malware threats being detected in the wild every day, and that the average lifespan of those threats is less than 2 days. So we're basically dealing with an onslaught every day of threats that we haven't seen before. So, classic sort of signature-based threat detection and mitigation is useful, but only for the long tail of threats. The vast majority of new threats are things that none of us have seen before. In terms of how threats are getting in, depending on your research, between 70 and 90% of cyber threats still get in via email. When one of your colleagues clicks on a link or an attachment that they shouldn't. But of course, rust never sleeps in the cybercrime business, and they're always exploring new ways to get malware in your system, to exfiltrate data, to lock up your data, to hold it for ransom. So there's attacks on credentials, either brute forcing or purchase of credentials that have been stolen by other cyber criminals. Supply chain attacks have become a real issue over the past few years, where cyber criminals compromise the software repositories of your tech vendors, so that when you go to download a feature release or a vulnerability patch update, you get malware in your system. And these are very high leverage attacks, very difficult to detect, quite sophisticated. We also have to worry about the human factor. There's inadvertent mistakes that all of us make in the course of doing our jobs. Again, that clicking on that phishing email or and in some cases, in the event, particularly in a climate where there are layoffs happening, you might have malicious insiders or former insiders wreaking some havoc. We also have noted over the past few years how much more sophisticated the typical attack is, how much stealthier it is, how much more persistent it is, and what a good job criminals are doing at quietly spreading throughout your organization to steal information and lock up data. So after they make their initial incursion, again, typically through phishing, they're going to surveil your environment, try to escalate privileges, turn off your data protection and security tools, and move laterally through the organization with their malware. The trends are not going in the right direction. We sort of looked with some satisfaction, I think maybe 13, 14 months ago, at the ransomware curve going from this to slightly flattening out. It looked like we were kind of winning the battle. And unfortunately, the more recent data suggests that it's trending back up again. And we believe a lot of that has to do with the new use of generative AI tools like ChatGPT that are enabling cyber criminals to scale up their attacks and make them more effective. So we're far from out of the woods. It looks like we're going to be dealing with ransomware as the most frequent and most destructive malware threat for a little while yet. I mentioned tech supply chain attacks and other incursions into your IT infrastructure. We know of the recent attacks over the past 3 years at least, very popular, widely used tools for network monitoring and management, or remote desktop management, or authentication being compromised, and criminals thereby spreading malware to hundreds of thousands of customers and actually managing to steal data from tens of thousands of them. We're also seeing how once they make that initial incursion, how they can take advantage of tools that you have that you use in your environment for beneficial purposes that they're turning to their own ends. So using a remote monitoring and maintenance tool to spread malware across desktops, to use backup tools to exfiltrate data to servers that they control, and so forth. We also have to worry about new techniques that target employees, whether that's trying to enlist them to help with their attacks through the use of bribes, or coming up with new ways to get them to turn off or subvert things like multi-factor authentication. The newest wrinkle, of course, is something that we started really seeing in earnest about 14, 15 months ago with the introduction of ChatGPT 3.5. We immediately looked at that as kind of a game changer in terms of the ability to bring the power of AI tools to the masses. And unfortunately, our adversaries have gotten first out of the blocks with the use of it and are using it rather more effectively than we are on defense yet. So just to look at a couple of the early applications of generative AI that have been very effective. Criminals are now writing much more compelling phishing emails, and they're doing it in multiple languages, and they're able to create thousands of them that can be iterated slightly and evade certain anti-phishing filters. So you don't have to be a proper English speaker or have strong English writing skills anymore to write perfectly crafted, grammatically error-free, spelling-free phishing emails. So relying on those kind of markers to spot a scam email doesn't really work anymore. And they're also able to use that to scale their attacks much more broadly. AI tools also make it possible to impersonate executives or to scam executives, whether it's through more convincing text emails, but also video and voice, as I'm going to talk about here. So deepfake video has gotten easy enough to use and prevalent enough to use that they are being used in scams. The story that you see on the right there that I clipped into this slide just happened a few days ago, where scammers came up with a deepfake video impersonation of a company executive and over a Zoom call managed to convince an employee to wire $25 million off-site. We're seeing similar things happening with photographic AI. So you might look at these three photos and say, those all look pretty convincing to me. Those look like real people, when in fact all three of them are faked. There's still some indicators that you might spot in certain deepfake photos. For some reason, ChatGPT can't seem to get the number of fingers on the human hand right. So a 6 or a 7 fingered image is almost certainly a fake. But they're getting better all the time in it. There's none of this uncanny valley sensation that you got a couple of years ago with a lot of AI generated photos. They are quite convincing these days. Similar things going on with audio. And this as well has been used very effectively in very expensive scams, where over a phone call, the AI, based on a very small sample of the person's voice, can mimic their speech, accent, usage patterns, and so forth so convincingly that they convince employees that it is indeed the CEO or the COO on the other end of the call and follow their instructions to do a big money transfer. Those are kind of the easy things to do, but we're seeing AI being used by fairly low skills criminals to do some scarier things. So write malware code or translate malware code from one programming language to another. You can now use Gen AI to scan existing code to find vulnerabilities and then write code to exploit those vulnerabilities. We're even seeing AI used to attack other AI models. So for example, Acronis's endpoint security in EDR, there's quite a bit of AI in it that helps us recognize these many new malware instantiations that we see every day. If you can get one of those things offline, you could potentially feed it bad information with a malicious AI to convince it to basically teach it to ignore certain threats that it would otherwise consider legitimate. I'll only briefly touch on these kind of what we anticipate as future trends in AI-enabled cybercrime, but they're all, if you look at the way I've scored them on the bottom there, currently they're still relatively low probability. So polymorphic and self-adapting malware are going to be destructive, but we rate them as pretty low probability at the moment. Of course, everyone's nightmare is the tech singularity when Skynet becomes self-aware and decides that humankind is an annoyance that should be wiped out. We don't see that happening with generative AI tools at all. Obviously, when there is that leap forward in AI, when AI really becomes self-aware and capable of kind of independent analysis and thought and the ability to create new ideas, that's probably doomed for humankind, but we don't see that happening. There's other more urgent threats that we should focus on first. It's worth remembering that AI doesn't turn idiots into geniuses. For example, to craft malware code with AI, you have to know a little bit about coding. You can't go in completely cold. And even if you were able to craft much better, say, ransomware code with the help of AI, you'd still have to do all the kind of infrastructure things around it, you know, the emails, the communications channels, the links to cryptocurrency networks and so forth. So it's not a kind of ransomware business in a box yet, but it does let a lot of comparatively low-skill criminals get into the game, and that's a problem. The automation aspects of it are also troubling. If you can use AI to help you amount of 1 million more phishing messages than you could do in a day before, that increases the likelihood through sheer numbers that something's going to slip through your email security, your anti-phishing measures, and the good sense of your employees, hopefully the cybersecurity awareness that you've given them through repeated training to be suspicious of emails from sources that they don't know. So it's not going to make you a supervillain overnight, but you can have pretty low skills and now get into the game. And we think that's part of the reason we've seen those like ransomware numbers trending back up, for instance. What they can't do is kind of craft new techniques, ingenious new kind of attacks. You really still need human ingenuity to do that. So the good news is none of the attacks are anything that's so novel and ingenious that we don't have measures in place, either in the form of technology or people skills or processes that should be able to stop them. But again, through refinements in attacks, more convincing phishing emails and, a much greater torrent of them, they have gotten more effective kind of through sheer numbers. But I would caution, a common objection I get is, well, doesn't ChatGPT and other tools like that have guardrails that prevent people doing bad things with them? The answer is yes, but it doesn't take a whole lot of skill and prompt engineering to jump those guardrails. So don't count on the internal safeguards that are in place to save us from that. All right, so it's time for me to introduce my esteemed speaker. It looks like we're going to have the agenda makes it look like I was going to invite my Acronis colleague on stage for that, but that's actually, we're saving him for the Q&A, and he's got a demo to get ready for, so I won't invite him on stage yet. However, my guest panelist here is someone I'm really excited to introduce. I don't always go through the long biography, but I think in this case, it really merits it. Lisa Soto chairs Hunton's top-ranked global privacy and cybersecurity practice and is the managing partner of the firm's New York office. She has received widespread recognition and acclaim for her work in privacy and cybersecurity, including top rankings in those areas by Chambers and Partners and the Legal 500. I'm not a lawyer, but I suspect those are very good accolades. She's also been honored with the 2021 award for outstanding contribution to the legal profession, among many other awards. She serves as the chairperson of the Department of Homeland Security's Data Privacy and Integrity Advisory Committee. She is known as the Priestess of Privacy and the Queen of Breach. Wow, I wish I had cool nicknames like that. Speaks frequently at conferences before the U.S. Congress and other global legislative bodies, and is the editor and lead author of Privacy and Security Law Desk Book. Phew! Welcome, Lisa Soto.
I am delighted to be here. Thank you so much, James.
We are delighted to have you here. It's we cybersecurity nerds, occasionally get very cool, accomplished cybersecurity people, but someone that really knows privacy and compliance from the legal perspective, it's quite a privilege to have you here.
Thank you.
All right, so let me start with some kind of table setting basics. Can we have you kind of walk our audience through the basics of the North American regulatory framework as it applies to privacy?
Absolutely. So I'm going to focus on the U.S., although I will note that in Canada, as part of North America, there are some very, very significant rules. So don't forget about Canada. But I'll focus on the U.S. So unfortunately, in the U.S., we have a very fragmented regime with respect to cybersecurity, data security, systems security. And we generally think in terms of three buckets of rules. First, federal law, and I'll come back to each one, state law, and then industry standards. Okay, so from on the federal law side, We, like in privacy, we tend to regulate by industry sector. So, for example, we have the Section 5 of the FTC Act, which applies to consumer security and ensuring that companies, or seeking to ensure that companies have appropriate safeguards to protect the personal information of consumers to which they are entrusted. With respect to financial services companies, financial institutions, we have the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act's safeguards rule. For healthcare entities, they are subject to HIPAA's security rule. We have laws around information sharing. We have now a very significant rule on the SEC side. I'm going to come back to that separately and just handle that separately because it's new and of real interest. And then there are rules for utilities, pipelines, nuclear, electric utilities, water coming down the pike, really ramping up right now, telecom, cable, et cetera, et cetera. So the list goes on. And really the federal rules are very much industry sector focused. On the state side, not so much. So we have an interesting quandary right now where the states, we often talk about the states as the incubator of laws and innovation. And the states really are doing that right now in the both the privacy and security context. So we have, for example, 14, depending on how you count, 13 or 14 state privacy laws that have security provisions built into them. Okay. We also have specific data security laws on the state side. And so we have to watch for that in many different states, and they are different from each other. They're not uniform. We have, of course, what I think is the most influential set of laws, really in the United States and globally, and these laws set the tone globally for similar laws, the breach notification rules. There are 54 of them in the United States, 50 states, plus Guam, U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and D.C. And these laws, of course, require notification to affected individuals, and in 30-some states, the regulators as well, if you have unauthorized access to or acquisition of data. Some of them have harm thresholds. They differ somewhat, but they're generally similar to each other. We also have Internet of Things rules. We have biometric data rules. All of those have security provisions built in. So we have this panoply of laws to watch out for, complemented by industry standards. And just to name some, the NIST cybersecurity framework, which I'm sure many of the participants on this call are very familiar with and comply with. The PCI, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, very important for the protection of payment cards, has been a huge influencer there. The ISO 27000 series, also a staple in the security library. And then the Center for Internet Security's critical security controls, also very important. And in fact, when Kamala Harris was the Attorney General in California, she said that anybody who doesn't comply with the CIS standards, she would deem to not have reasonable security. And there is a law in California mandating reasonable security. So it's messy. And that's where we are. And I promised you, James, I would come back to the SEC. So let me, if I can spend 2 minutes on that, because that is on everybody's mind right now. In July, the Securities and Exchange Commission pushed out its final set of rules around cybersecurity. What they require is notification via an 8K form within 4 business days of determining materiality of an incident. And we know that sometimes that happens in the first hour, sometimes it happens the first day. The SEC has said that they don't expect too many companies to be able to nail that down in the first week. I don't agree with that. I think that's not right. I think in most cases, we know pretty darn fast whether something is material or not. And of course, you've talked about ransomware, and if all your systems are locked up, you know that's about to be quite material for the company. In addition to the 8K, and we've now seen many of those pushed out, even before the December 18th deadline to comply. December 18th of 2023 was the deadline to comply with this 8K rule. But even before that, of course, there were many 8Ks pushed out and notices given because there were general materiality obligations in connection with security disclosure. And then you also need to now significantly beef up your 10K form, and that is something that I've seen 30 or more of those in the last few weeks from companies that have asked for review because everybody is very nervous about the language that's used in those forms. I just want to mention one other interesting tidbit. When we talk about the audacity of the threat actors, Black Cat, also known as Alpha V, filed before the December 18th deadline, interestingly, okay, they weren't legal experts, but close enough, filed a whistleblower hotline complaint against a company to say, hey, they were compromised and they should have filed an 8K. And they're required to do so within 4 days, and they didn't do it. And they named
Ransomware gangsters, they just want to help.
Just want to help. So they're augmenting the security posture of U.S. companies. Thank you very much. So there it is. I mean, that was really quite audacious.
I love that story. I assume the SEC rules only apply to publicly held companies.
Correct.
And this is one this question that kind of comes up as well, just for clarification here, because I think I just presented to a European audience this morning. And with GDPR, you don't have to be based in the EU for it to apply to you. You just have to be holding the data of residents of the EU. Does a similar thing apply with like the California privacy protection rule? Is it a function of, do you have to be doing business there, or do you just have to have customers there?
I'm going to tweak the GDPR rules a little bit. So either you're processing data through a facility located in the European Union, or you're offering goods and services to Europeans and you're holding their data. So it's not just holding data. There has to be some other jurisdictional ability to capture jurisdiction, but generally that's right. California, we think about, well, California and everywhere else, if an individual whose data was compromised lives in a particular state, that is the state whose laws you need to comply with for breach notification purposes.
So there's a good chance that if you're doing business in the US, you might have a customer in California, and therefore you got to worry about CCPA.
Right, and CCPA is slightly different. That's in the bucket of the comprehensive privacy laws that I mentioned that have security provisions, aren't focused on security, but have security provisions. You have to worry about the California breach notification law as well as the other 53 of them in the US.
So I imagine you've worked with thousands of clients and have great experience of how a breach typically proceeds, what the sequence of events here when a company is hit. Can you, for those of us who haven't been lucky enough not to live through that, but live in fear of it and are tasked with doing everything we can to prevent it, can you walk us through that typical, the experience of a business undergoing a breach?
Of course. So the first thing that happens is we detect an anomaly in our systems. It could be an in-your-face anomaly, like your systems are locked up and there's something that pops up on your screen to tell you that ransomware has been deployed. Or it could be more subtle, like that you may not detect it, but the FBI might call, or and this is what everybody just hates, media might call. And let you know that your data is out there on the dark web, or there's some chatter about the company on the dark web. So in some way, you are detecting that something has happened. You then need to mobilize your incident response team. That team hopefully is well rehearsed. Hopefully they've practiced through tabletop exercises. Hopefully the phone list of the incident response team is written on paper and printed, because the system might be locked up and you can't get to it. and hopefully there's an out-of-band communication channel by which you can that you can use to contact the incident response team members. You mobilize the team. You look to see quickly whether the threat actor is still in the system. And we may need to look to stabilize systems very, very quickly if that's the case, and if they're still traversing across the system. That we want to prevent. Like, we want to prevent the movement of a threat actor from information technology over to operational technology, for example. So we look to do that. We will hopefully the organization will call counsel very, very quickly. Hopefully they know who they're going to call in advance. And counsel will then work with the company fast to hire a forensic investigation firm. And if we're talking about extortion or ransomware, also an extortion or ransomware negotiation firm. And there are specific firms that do just that. And I'll also note that you should know in advance who you're going to hire on the forensic side and on the extortion negotiation side, and certainly counsel. We hire the forensic firm and the negotiation firm under privilege, so counsel needs to be on that contract, and we hope to be able to retain legal privilege around the results of the work of these experts. It's not guaranteed by any means, and there's some court cases that are not favorable, but certainly we do everything we can to protect privilege. So we bring in the forensic firm, we bring in the ransomware negotiator, we start to do the forensic investigation. While that's all happening, we're also likely going to want to notify law enforcement in the US or elsewhere, depending on where the company is headquartered. My view is the FBI is among the most talented cyber agency and law enforcement agency in the world. So we either call them if you have a contact there, or we fill out an IC3 form and get that to them, the Internet Crimes form, and tell them what's been happening, and they may contact us as a result. We may engage with the threat actor, depending on whether you have good backups, good clean backups that have not been infected. If you have those backups, then you might engage with the threat actor only for the purpose of delaying adverse action on the part of the threat actor, like posting your company's logo or posting the data. Or you may be engaging for the purpose of actually paying some ransom amount that hopefully you can negotiate down, because now they're starting with astronomical amounts.
Yes.
They're very high these days. So we're doing the forensic investigation, working with law enforcement, and negotiating all in parallel tracks, and looking to remediate at the same time. So the investigation is ongoing, and we're also looking to plug any vulnerabilities. If we don't look for backdoors and look to plug those backdoors, the threat actor may well come back. We're also thinking at the same time about our legal posture. How are we protecting privilege? How are we preserving evidence? Have we notified our insurer timely, so that we can, if you have cyber insurance, so that you can try to at least make a claim on your policy? Also, do we have any legal obligations, like notification to regulators? And in some cases, like for pipelines, you have to notify the TSA within 24 hours, for example. In the electric sector, there are 1 and 6 hour requirements. For less heavily regulated entities, the periods are much, much longer, 30 days, for example. In some states, some are 45, some are 60, some don't have concrete time periods. So that's all over the place. It's across the board, and we have to really be very well aware of what our legal obligations are in this space. And you can bet that if you have a sizable incident, there is going to be regulatory response. A regulator will come back and ask you some questions. And particularly with a consumer population. It is reasonably likely these days that you will get hit with a consumer class action lawsuit. Those go on for years, so we will be dealing with these incidents sometimes for 2, 3, or more years. And then at the end of the day, what we really want to do is a postmortem. So we want to understand what happened, what could we have done better, because we want to be prepared for the next time, and there is likely to be a next time.
Right. I often talk to customers who are trying to build a business case for investing in cybersecurity infrastructure, training their staff better, help with developing policies because they understand that recovery costs from a breach are expensive. If you're publicly held, it can hurt your stock price. Certainly has the potential to damage relationships with partners and customers. Word gets out that you can't protect their data effectively, they might switch to a competitor. I've been sort of waiting to hear more about accountability, like who gets their feet held to the fire in the event of a breach, because it seems to me that's a lever that you should be pulling if you're looking to get budget for beefing up your endpoint detection and response capability, for instance. I wondered if you could talk about how the accountability in this context has evolved.
This is an issue that is making CISOs quake in their boots. Things have shifted dramatically with respect to individual accountability. So Joe Sullivan, the former chief security officer at Uber, was convicted in connection. He was the first person who was ever convicted or even charged in connection with the handling of a security incident. We're all so well aware of this, but he was charged with failing to disclose a 2016 breach when he was in the middle of having discussions with the FTC about an earlier breach. So he was charged with obstruction of justice and concealing a felony in connection with the handling of an issue involving 57 million customers and drivers. On the heels of that conviction, the Drizzly CEO also had his feet held to the fire. Drizzly, which happens to be an Uber company, Drizzly also suffered an incident, and the FTC brought an action against Drizzly and its CEO individually. The CEO was deemed to not have taken appropriate safeguards to protect customer data, and the CEO now is held to a 10-year consent order requiring him, at whatever company he holds a senior position, to put in place a reasonable security program. So that's a 10-year marriage with the FTC.
It's like follows him around.
Follows him around. So that's individual responsibility. And finally, SolarWinds, and this is where folks are very, very nervous. The SEC recently charged both SolarWinds and its CISO with various securities violations in connection with its handling and prior to its handling of its massive security incident. We're watching to see how that evolves, but right now the SEC has a complaint in, and there's an action brewing, and there have been a number of amicus briefs filed by various groups to say, hey, don't punish the CISO, but we're all watching that with bated breath.
Well, we're certainly, we in the tech business are in favor of making it easier for our customers to build the business case for improving their cybersecurity. All right, we're running out of time for our discussion here. There was one more question I wanted to ask of you before we move to our next phase here. which is just maybe very briefly, talk about what preparations our audience can take from a legal perspective. Acronis has got a lot of advice on the technology side, but from a legal perspective, what should they be doing to, prepare to honor their compliance obligations?
So very quickly, make sure you have a state-of-the-art incident response plan. That is not a static document. It needs to be revisited over time. Make sure your incident response team is well rehearsed. They know what they're doing and they're cohesive. Make sure you know who your experts will be in the event of an incident. What forensic investigator will you hire? What law firm? What ransomware negotiator? Do you need an external PR firm, for example? So those are some specific issues. I'll also just note that, of course, everybody on this call knows this, but vendors, employees, suppliers are a huge source of risk. So make sure you have a vendor management program and an insider risk program. Training and awareness, critical, absolutely critical, and evaluate your cyber insurance needs. So I'll stop there.
Fantastic insight, Lisa. Thank you so much. Please don't go away. We're going to do a little tour of Acronis Cyber Protect, but after that, we're going to take audience questions, so I'll need you in a minute. In the meantime, I want to introduce my Acronis colleague, who is a senior solutions engineer here. He's going to give us a very brief tour of our solution to help businesses meet their compliance obligations with a combination of cybersecurity and data protection. Dimitri Korahays, excuse me, Dimitri Korahays, over to you, please.
Thanks, James. So now let's go take a look at Acronis Cyber Protect. I'll give you an overview of the types of supported systems, management options, and storage options. We support all the common platforms from Windows, Linux, Mac, virtual machines, Microsoft 365, and so on. Those are just a few of the platforms, applications, and environments we support. So you can start with whatever you need today, but have the flexibility to add on or scale down the road as your needs might change. There are two different management models. Most common these days is cloud management, and that's what we'll focus on, but we do also offer the option to run a local management server. In most ways, those are pretty similar. There's a few differences, but key concept is that with either model, it's up to you where you store the backups. They could be entirely local, entirely cloud, or whatever combination of the two that you want. Coming back here, we'll take a look first here at the cloud-based management console. So this is a dashboard. It's giving us an overview. There's ways to monitor through this and reporting. But starting point, obviously, is that you would get one or more machines connected to the console. You'd install the agent for Windows or Hyper-V or VMware, whatever it might be. And you'll see the machines appear here. I'll pull up a machine here just to give you a visual concept. This is a Windows 10 machine that has the Acronis agent installed on it. There's a status monitor here that can be displayed for the user, or you can decide not to display it. Either way, it's designed to be managed centrally so that the end user doesn't need to do anything. Everything is through the console. So we could select a machine here and see the different types of things that are applied. In this case, we've got a protection plan that includes backup, but also other options, and you can use some or all of these. If you're just interested in backup, that's fine. If you want to use it for other capabilities, antivirus, anti-malware, those are options. URL filtering is an option as well to either minimize the chance of employees clicking on phishing links or even blocking access to certain categories of websites that may not be appropriate. Taking a look here from this perspective, you can see we've got multiple plans applied to one or more machines. And if you just go to create a plan from scratch, you'll see see how flexible it is. So the default is entire machine, but if you want to back up certain files and folders or SQL databases, you can do that either selectively or altogether. Again, backing up to whatever storage you want, whether it's cloud or local storage. You also have options to back up to other storage like Azure storage. And scheduling is entirely flexible. I won't go into all these options, but basically wherever you see these blue hyperlinks here, this will take you to more configuration options, which are very flexible. This happens to default now to 90 backups. This can be adjusted to whatever you want. Backups could be kept indefinitely or going back a certain number of days, weeks, months. And then you can apply the other options as needed if you want to use antivirus, anti-malware, and again, very similar scheduling options. Now let's take a look at the options related to recovery, starting with validation plans. So you want to make sure that your backups are good and you can recover from them if and when needed. And an easy way to do that is to set up a validation plan that can validate a set of backups on whatever schedule you want. You could designate a certain agent that'll do the validation. Could be a physical machine or a virtual machine. And you can have it validate based on checksum or even by spinning up a temporary virtual machine and even taking a screenshot of the login screen. If you do need to recover files, folders, or entire machine, there's different ways you can initiate that. One way is through the web console. So I can pick a machine, say recover, and in this case we've got backups in 2 different locations. Pick one of those. You can see the different recovery points we've got based on the schedule and the retention options. And I could go restore the whole thing back to the same machine, a different machine, or to a virtual machine. It could be just files and folders. You can do that easily as well through the web interface. Even if the only backup was entire machine, you can always recover files and folders from that. And you can do that selectively through this. It'll go by default back to the same machine. You could pick a different machine or a different location. Just a couple steps to walk through there. Similar idea in this case. This is a SQL server, and we could restore specific SQL databases if we wanted to, or we could just spin up the whole thing as a virtual machine. Another option is cloud-based disaster recovery. So for a given machine that you're backing up to cloud, you can set up a DR server in cloud that you can fail over to in an Acronis data center. So I can pick the specs that I want for it. These can be changed later. A few other options related to networking and whether you want to have automatic test failover done. If we go over to the disaster recovery tab here, we'll see that we've got this already configured for these 2 servers. One is in the failover state currently. This one is in standby. You can see the specs configured for it and everything, and I'll go ahead and initiate the failover. You can do a test failover or production, pick the recovery point, and hit start, and then it will spin that up. It'll take typically about 5 minutes or so to get that up and running. Meanwhile, we can go take a look at this other one that's already in the failover state. So at this point, we could go connect to it through the web-based console, or ideally you would have connectivity set up between your local site and the Acronis data center so that users and machines there could access the DR server essentially as if it was local. Then of course there's options to fail back as well, back to the original machine or to a replacement machine. And that can be physical or virtual. Also, one of the unique things about our disaster recovery offering is that it can be HIPAA compliant, and you can have your servers backups encrypted and still fail over in the Acronis data center in a HIPAA compliant way. This also ties into our data centers. You'll see on the website a listing of the data centers. We do have data centers around the world. For this webinar, the ones in North America would typically be the relevant ones. Whichever one you're using, that's where your data would be for Acronis Cloud backup storage and disaster recovery. You don't need to worry about your data going, passing through other countries. It's going to be straight, from the machines you're backing up, to that Acronis data center. And then to wrap up, I'll point out a few other security and compliance related aspects. There's also this management layer where you can first of all define who has access to the console, so you can decide which administrators can get to it, and then there are security options at this level as well, including two-factor authentication. You could even lock down the web-based console to certain IP ranges, and then for backups in Acronis data centers, you can enable immutable cloud storage. What that does is add an additional delay before backups are deleted. By default, it's 14 days. You could set this to whatever you want. And then if a backup is deleted accidentally or maliciously, you could still recover it during that period of time. Everything is tracked through an audit log and various levels of activities and reporting. There's operations reports that are similar to the dashboard view that you see in the main console. These can be adjusted with various widgets, and you can view and download these through the web interface, or you can schedule them to send on a schedule to certain email addresses as Excel and or PDF. So that's a quick overview of Acronis Cyber Protect. There's a lot more we can get into. We're about out of time, so I will stop here and hand it back, and we'll be happy to address any questions that come up.
Thanks for that so much, Dimitri. A nice job of a nice compact highlighting of features of our platform that support the kind of compliance issues we've been talking about. So, Dimitri, if you could come back on camera. Lisa, if you could join us again as well. I've got a few questions from the audience here that I want to get through before I wrap up. Jason offers a good one right off the top here. Regarding reputation, as part of an incident response team, are there recommendations for including marketing or communications teams for dealing with customers, partners, or even media outlets requesting information? Lisa, I suspect you have some perspective on this.
I have a view. Yes, absolutely. Not marketing, but communications. One thing that we don't want to do is use this as an opportunity to market. I think you'll get a lot of snarky comments back. But comms, yes. And we often will bring in a third-party PR firm that is expert in breaches, and not all external PR firms are. So comms firms that really understand cyber incidents are invaluable. They will help you identify the different stakeholder groups to which you're going to want to communicate, and when the right timing is, and what the key messages are. So often we as counsel will work very closely with the comms team and external comms firm to craft key messages that are dead on accurate, right? We can't be inaccurate in what we're saying, but that also don't overpromise, because often we are want to say things like, we're going to do everything we can. We're not going to do everything we can. We're going to do what we can at the right time and within reason. We're not going to give you updates immediately, right? So we're careful about what we say, but these external PR firms who understand this landscape are invaluable in helping to craft key messages, and then off of those key messages, write talking points for different stakeholder groups over the course of time as the facts evolve.
Fantastic. All right, let's go to the next one here. Sanju says, I'm starting an MSP, that's managed service provider for people that aren't familiar with that category of IT services provider, and would like to know as an MSP, what type of insurance do I need and what should I recommend to my clients? I've got some thoughts on this, but Lisa, do you have an observation you want to toss in here? This is someone who's managing IT on behalf of typically smaller businesses, what they ought to be insuring themselves with here.
It's very much a case by case situation. So certainly you want to go to a broker who understands this landscape, who can tell you what cyber policies are available. And in some cases, cyber insurers don't even want to insure anymore. It depends on lots of factors. So they consider that. And by the way, it's expensive as well, at least in some cases. So you have to factor that in. As to what clients should have, I would say I think it's very important for them to individually assess what data they have, what is the sensitivity level, how much of it, what security measures do they have in place? There are so many factors that go into this. I think it's very much an individual decision on how much cyber insurance to take, who will cover you, what the panel, whether you want to stick with the panel firms or write in, and many of our clients write in firms that they want to use to the policy if you're allowed to do that, depending on your underwriting process.
Right. I'll let me add to that this is a subject we talk a lot about at Acronis because particularly with the advent of industrialized ransomware production and now AI enhanced cyber threats, that the insurance industry has gotten much more stringent about who it will insure. Higher thresholds, you've got to basically prove that you're doing a lot of the similar kind of things that we talk about in the compliance sphere to make sure that you're not carelessly operating and drive up your insurer's costs. There's definitely some insurance. The term escapes me now. Forgive me. I'm not an insurance expert. That is basically insuring yourself to protect yourself against being sued by your client's own insurer as having blame for a potential breach when it might have been entirely your client's sloppiness that led to the breach. And then in terms of recommending it to your customers, we also have recommendations about that. I would point you to the acronis.events page and look for a recent webinar that we did on cyber insurance that's targeted at the MSP audience. I'd also point out that cyber insurance, like compliance, is an opportunity to go talk to your clients about improving their overall cybersecurity and data protection posture with services that you can deliver to them. For example, with the Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud, which is our platform for MSPs. For more details on that, we also hold regular events on this because it's a super pressing question, not only for MSPs but for businesses overall. Got a quick question from Gordon, which is, what is Acronis' typical client size in terms of seats or revenue? There's two answers there. Much of our business goes through the managed service provider channel, and their clients who are consuming our technology as a service are typically small and medium businesses. I would say mostly 200 employees or fewer. We also have a large presence in the enterprise sector. They are mostly buying our platform directly from us, the platform that you saw Dimitri demo earlier, and they are Global 2000 size companies in both commerce and the industrial sector. We can probably tell you more about individual names under NDA if you want to get closer to us here. Gordon's other question I'm going to leave for now because we're kind of running out of time here. Last question here is from an anonymous attendee who asks, where can I find that where does Acronis show how they support various compliance standards, IRS, FTC, Graham-Leach-Bliley? And the answer there is I am working on a page on our website that documents that. You can have a conversation with us if you want to learn more about it right now. But because this is kind of such a hot topic, why we're doing webinars on it right now is we're getting a lot of those kind of inquiries. and I'm actually doing the research to put all that together. And you'll find some of it on our website already, but I'm going to get a little bit more granular with it, particularly as it relates to emerging standards like the EU's NIS2 standard. All right, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. I want to respect people's time here. Thank you so much, Lisa Soto, for a fantastic insight from a legal perspective. Thanks, Dimitri, for that great demo and your help answering questions backstage here. I want to get to a quick wrap up here and send everybody home. Just a few resources I want to point you to. Oh, by the way, we've got a little poll going here. Let us know if you want Acronis to contact you or set up a demo or a consult with one of our solutions engineers who want to learn more about that. But a few pieces here that we've put together that I encourage you to download. The ransomware response plan for business maps very neatly onto the compliance issues that we've talked about. It talks about a broad range of technology, process, and people steps that you can take to defend yourself against ransomware. But oh, by the way, that'll also help you get better qualified for cyber insurance, and it will help you with your potential improving your compliance posture. So that's a very handy 12-step kind of program for doing that. And it's not all stuff Acronis can help you with, like network security's in there. We don't do that, but that's a piece I've written that has been extremely popular and helpful to our customers. The Acronis Cyber Threats report is our latest in a kind of a semi-monthly or bi-monthly series of reports we write that talks about trends in cyber threats based on our research and monitoring, and also what's on the minds of your peers in business, what issues they are wrestling with and where they're investing in it. So a good way to take the temperature of what's going on in this the cyber threat environment. And a couple of pieces on business continuity planning and zero-day threats. I'd also encourage you, I wish I had included it in this, I'm saying now, but there's a piece I wrote that you can get on the Acronis Resource Center for free. Search for supply chain attacks. It's a good document that will help you take some steps to improve your defenses against tech supply chain attacks and to vet your vendors for what they're doing to prevent being a link in a tech supply chain attack, and whether they're doing a good job of secure software development. All right, I'm afraid that's all the time that we have for today. I want to thank you so much for spending an hour with us. Please support the Acronis Cyber Foundation if you've got the means and the inclination. It's our nonprofit arm that builds schools and provides tech education for kids in need around the world. Thanks so much again for your time, everybody. We hope to see you again at another Acronis event soon. Have a great one.